George Herbert, so she knows a lot about sighing and groaning in religious texts.
A lot of religious authors refer to sighs and groans, unutterable sighs and groans that might not be heard by us, but they do have the power to communicate our message to the divine. So sighs are also powerful in transmitting a message.
Affliction 3 by George Herbert. My heart did heave, and there came forth, O God. By that I knew that thou was in
what matters is how the person is doing. I mean, it's nice if a woman does well, but it's more important whether they're doing the right things and how they're doing it. And I think Theresa May, given the position the Conservative Party was in, the choice they had, I think she was unquestionably the right choice for them to make. And I'm sure she'll do the best job she can. Whether we will in the end all feel that she's doing the right job in the right way, that's another matter. But, all credit to her.
Well, the polls seem to be in her favour as opposed towards your party, don't they?
Well, yes, and that's not wholly understandable. She's a new Prime Minister. She's getting a fair win, and that is fair. The British are a very fair people, and people are being fair to Theresa May. She's made, I think, a lot of enemies in her own party. I mean, the swathe that she's cut through the ranks of ministers is extraordinary. So I'm sure she will have problems, but okay. I mean, we must all hope that she succeeds in the Brexit negotiations.
The hope there. Well, Theresa Villiers, you were relieved of your duties by Theresa May.
Indeed, yes. I was one of the people who got the bullet. I think she's had...
It's been a brutal year then for politics in 2016.
Well, certainly I feel a bit battered after the last 12 months. But I think Theresa May has a phenomenally successful start. The Conservatives are way ahead in the polls. She's pressing ahead with key reforms. She's doing the preparations that we need to do for the Brexit negotiations to implement the results of the referendum. So there will be undoubtedly very difficult times ahead because...
Do you not think there's difficult times right now? I mean, she said there wouldn't be a running commentary on Brexit negotiations. We'll get to Brexit in the sense of how she's doing with that, but there is a frustration that people don't know anymore as we go into Christmas.
She was very clear at the Conservative Party conference that she is going to take back control of our immigration policy, and at the same time...
point system, is that right? Australian point system?
I think we need to restore democratic controls to our immigration policy. A point system would be one way to do that. There are plenty of other ways in which we can. The important thing is that we return to a system where the people we elect at a general election make decisions on immigration.
Baroness Susan Craven, then, from the Liberal Democrat side of things, how's Theresa May looking?
Well, I mean, as a woman, I always sort of go out there and want to cheer for women in senior positions and a woman Prime Minister. But look, we went through the Richmond by-election, and obviously the Liberal Democrats won that. But on every doorstep, virtually, you understood how divided the country is, and I think far more so than before the days of the referendum. There is a deep anger. And the number of people who stopped me on the doorstep and switched their votes, Conservative, Labour, Green in the past, that's to Liberal Democrat on this occasion, and they said it's not just about Brexit. Brexit was crucially important, but it was bigger than that. It was the sense that nationalism and populism are on the rise, and that Theresa May is aligned with that. She made a statement at the Conservative Party conference, much applauded by many people there, that if you were a citizen of the world, you were a citizen of nowhere. And it expressed, I think, for so many people who do want to be citizens of the world, want to raise their children as citizens of the world, and being suddenly told that they don't belong in this country. And I'm talking about British-born, that's not just people who come from other countries. That was almost a seminal phrase. And this sense, you look at Trump, you look at the other movements across the rest of the globe, this sense that again we have this rise of this nationalist populist movement, and their anger was very great. Now, do I see Theresa May pulling the country back together in this, out there bringing people back together to a sense of oneness, looking to the future with some sort of optimism and strength? I don't see
You don't see that, but
I don't see that.
Theresa Villas, do you have a strong sense of what Mayism is? You're a Conservative MP.
I believe at the heart of Mayism is responding to the concerns that people expressed in the referendum, and we're a group with Susan. I think it probably went beyond some of the issues directly at stake in whether we stayed in the European Union or whether we didn't. She believes that many people feel a sense of disquiet and discontent that somehow the country works for the privileged few but not for them, and dealing with that, making sure we're a genuine meritocracy, making sure that there is real social mobility in this country. That's absolutely at the heart of what the Prime Minister wants to do. That's the way in which she wants to change.
And is it a happy ship as she sails into Christmas? I mean, I was interested to see her chief spokeswoman, Helen Bauer, walked out and has gone over to work for Boris Johnson in the Foreign Office. She's worked there for 6 years under David Cameron. There's all these sorts of stories coming out about, her people being extremely controlling around her and not consulting. What's it feel like to be a Conservative MP under Theresa May?
It feels like a Prime Minister who is very prepared to engage with MPs, with business leaders. She is someone who's prepared to listen to a case that's put to her. It's very clear that she judges each issue on the evidence.
Okay.
I think.
Do you recognise any of this in the reports, though?
But if the
You're
worst
smiling.
if the worst news is some staffer walked out of Downing Street and went to the Foreign Office, I really don't think that's anything particularly dramatic. Theresa is incredibly effective at what she does. To have become Prime Minister when, whilst these days, thankfully, women in politics, we're not that unusual. Many of the sort of barriers have been removed, but for much of her time in politics, it was extremely difficult to get taken seriously.
The worst news is that we are facing a cliff edge with the triggering of Article 50 coming in just a few weeks, with no coherent plan in place to deal with any of this. And you know as well as I do, Theresa, we still talk with people that we knew back in the days of government and up and down. The Deloitte report of 50 groups, all chaotically unable to resolve problems, doing nothing but finding more problems every time they look at an issue. It's yet more complex, it's yet more difficult, there isn't enough time to resolve it. So the attempts to do triage and damage control as we move towards triggering Article 50 are in such terrible shape, and that has, I'm afraid, to come down to a failure of leadership.
A failure of leadership, Theresa, do you recognise that?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think sort of that
But people don't feel there is a plan. And we have
There
these
isn't one.
we have these reports coming out from Deloitte, who, the consultancy who's had to agree today not to bid for 6 months for any government work because they seem to have angered Number 10 with this leaked report that showed there was no plan.
Well, it was unsolicited and it was leaked, and it doesn't reflect the reality of the hard work that's going on in government to implement what is one of the biggest decisions we've made in this country.
So as a
for the
Brexiteer,
last 50
you're
years.
content with the leadership on this issue from Theresa May?
Absolutely, I am, because it's inevitably it is a complex process. It is difficult, but I am absolutely confident that the Prime Minister and her team are doing the work that we need to prepare for those crucial negotiations about to start.
Dame Margaret Beckett, you say you hope there's a plan in place. When you hear these reports, are you concerned about Theresa May on this?
Very, but to be completely fair to Theresa May, you were right. It's an absolute failure of leadership, but it's not hers. It was David Cameron who not only failed to get this government to prepare for the possibility of a no vote, but actually, as I understand it, instructed government departments not to do so in case something leaked, and that was embarrassing. So, I mean, it is a huge failure. It's an absolute betrayal of the interests of the British people, but it's not down to Theresa May, and she's now trying to pick up the pieces.
You could say she's got one of the toughest jobs in politics right now, picking up those pieces. Well, one thing that hasn't changed over the past year, a little bit of consistency in all of this, Jeremy Corbyn is still leader of the Labour Party, but not without having to face his own fresh leadership election.
It's been about our Labour family facing the future of how we do things together in the future. I will do everything I can to repay the trust and the
but then have rode back on that. Where are you now at the end of 2016?
I don't think there's any doubt Jeremy is, as he's built up experience. I mean, don't forget, he had no experience at all of any kind of front bench responsibility. He's had to learn the hard way. And I think that he's definitely improved his position, improved his standing, he handles things better, he speaks better, and that's all to the good.
But when you speak to people in your constituency, will they vote for a Labour headed by Jeremy Corbyn?
I don't think anybody's thinking about general elections at the moment, except for journalists.
Well, forgive us. It is something where it's a barometer.
I'm not criticising you doing. I'm just saying people aren't saying. All right, activists sometimes say, "What do you think will happen?" But basically, people are getting on with their lives, and they'll worry about a general election when they have to.
But are there still not two forms of Labour MP at the moment? The ones that are trying and standing by Corbyn. You sound actually like you're in a middle group, which is now trying to stand by Corbyn, but there are the ones who are with him, and there are the ones who don't want him to be leader.
I think there are, and my impression is, it's not always hard to tell, that it's a relatively small handful who are absolutely unreconciled and always will be no matter what happens. And then there are people who are, as you say, enthusiastic supporters. I mean, one of the interesting things about Jeremy's leadership has been that as a result of the changes that have ensued, we've discovered a whole range of talent among some of the newer and younger MPs, and that's very encouraging for us for the future.
Very encouraging. Do you see a split?
No.
You don't?
No.
That's not going to be coming down in 2017 with Tony Blair trying to make a move back into politics.
Well, I don't get the impression that what Tony's doing has got anything to do with trying to split the Labour Party.
Well, not trying, but maybe cashing in on the fact there's a split that could be there.
No. I mean, there's no secret about it. There are strong differences of view. There are very great concerns in some parts of the party. But I don't come across people who are talking about a split. We've been there, done that, and it may have been not in the political lifetime of this present generation of politicians, but they are capable, hopefully, and there's no question about it. They're capable of seeing what happened the last time the Labour Party split and making a decision as to whether or not they want to repeat the experience.
So as we head into 2017, Dame Margaret Beckett, are you in Jeremy Corbyn's camp?
Jeremy is the leader of the Labour Party, and I wholeheartedly support him in that role.
Beautifully put. Everyone's laughing here. Okay. I don't know why. I can't think why. Susan Kramer then. Jeremy Corbyn, is he, usually at this point we're getting ready to see him go up against Theresa May in Prime Minister's questions. Is he doing a good enough job at holding the government to account?
I mean, the Labour Party's got to sort itself out. I mean, at the moment, we are at a time, just a really incredible turning point time. We have the huge questions offered by Brexit. The forecasts for the economy are exceedingly poor. We've got massive cuts in key areas of public spending. Most of our schools, particularly in this London area, are going to find their funding critically cut. The NHS is absolutely at breaking point. We have Aleppo, Syria, Putin flexing his muscles. We need an opposition party that is able to command the floor, the House and the country at this point in time, and Labour isn't being it.
You don't think Mr Corbyn has improved?
He's not fulfilling the task that has to be
Psy was presented by Imtiaz Darker and produced by Claire Jenkins. The reader was Daniel Wayman. The Psy was a Pennine production for BBC Radio 4. Where in a moment, Stanley Baxter and Geoffrey Palmer tell a heartwarming tale of two lives linked by events in Glasgow 90 years ago. For that to get you in festive mood.
I walked abroad in a snowy day. I asked the soft snow with me to play.
Christmas on BBC Radio 4.
Greetings, Martha, sacred donkey, bearer of miracles. Then ring, ring, Christmas bells, till your sweet music o'er the kingdom swells, to warn the people to respect the morn that Christ their Saviour.
That happened to the country following the financial collapse in 2007, 2008. We were finally getting to the point where the fundamentals were starting to work. Not for everybody, absolutely not. And not across the country, and people have been left out. But the machine was beginning to really get up and get running. And put it in a position where you could start to deliver the jobs, the businesses, the wage improvements, and the opportunities. That was already getting shaky when, under Cameron and Osborne running the thing by themselves. But I think now with Brexit, all of that is now set back. And I worry for the country, and I look at the opportunities that will be there for my grandchildren, and I don't think they will be the quality of opportunity that could have been there, and that makes me feel that is a tragedy, because it's not just my grandkids, it's everybody else.
Theresa Millis, very briefly, what's your word then?
Dramatic, because we've taken the decision to become an independent, self-governing democracy again. And I think that's much to be welcomed. I uttered, Susan, the idea that the economy is car crashing, there is just no evidence to justify that.
Well, then you're not out there talking with businesses and the decisions of the
IMF say we're the fastest growing economy in the G7.
Okay, I am going to have to leave it there. Dame Margaret Beckett, Baroness Susan Kramer, and Theresa Millis, thank you so much. Lots of words coming in to describe 2016. I'll read them out just after the news, but I have to cross the headlines. It's 11:32.
On digital, online, smartphone and tablet, this is BBC 5 Live.
With the headlines, I'm Richard Foster. Reports from Germany say police are looking for a Tunisian man of the lorry attack on a Christmas market in Berlin. Officers are said to have found his documents in the lorry that was driven into a crowd of shoppers, killing 12 people. Security's been increased around Buckingham Palace in response to the attack. Roads nearby will be closed for nearly 2 hours on the days when the changing of the guard ceremony is held. Police say there's been a rise in the number of football clubs linked to allegations of historical child sex abuse. 148 clubs are now part of the investigations, with 155 potential suspects and 421 victims. And official figures show the government borrowed more money than expected last month. Public sector borrowing reached £12.6 billion in November, around £500 million more than analysts had predicted. That's the news. Delith has the sport.
The former England captain Michael Vaughan says Alistair Cook's runs are more important to the team than his captaincy. Cook admits that he's got to go home and do some thinking after the 4-0 series defeat to India. Vaughan says the decision has to be made prior to the summer tests against South Africa and the West Indies.
South Africa are a quality team. Quite easily could come to England, as they did last time and beat the England side. He can't suddenly go, oh no, what have I done? Why have I carried on? He has to make the call sooner rather than later, but he's also got to understand if he carries on, for every bad day England have, the whole story of the England team will be about Alistair Cook.
You can hear more from Michael and Vaughan in the Tuffers and Vaughan podcast. England's Chris Jordan has taken 2 for 29 playing for Adelaide Strikers against Brisbane Heat in the Big Bash T20. Heat scored 206 for 5. The Strikers are 153 for 2 in the 15th over. Elsewhere, Cricket Ireland has announced that former England batsman Ed Joyce has accepted a central contract. The singles winners of next year's Australian Open will each pocket £2.1 million. It's after tournament organisers increased its prize money up
his neck, doesn't he, as he's gone down?
Well, a concussion panel was set up after the winger played on, despite landing on his head. Meanwhile, the England head coach Eddie Jones says Dylan Hartley let his country down with the third red card of his career. He's serving a 6 weeks ban, and Jones has told the Telegraph this is not the last chance for him, but he understands he can't behave in the way he did. The former Le Mans winner Alan McNeish says Lewis Hamilton won't miss the competition from Nico Rosberg in Formula One next season. His partner at Mercedes is yet to be decided, but Valtteri Bottas is the clear front-runner.
I don't think he'll miss it because ultimately he's got the team to himself at the moment, and so from his championship perspective in 2017 he's got a little bit better options available to him. You know, as a racing driver you just look to see who your teammate is, and they tend to be faceless in a way. It doesn't matter who they are, you've got to beat them, because if you don't beat them you're not going to be a champion.
Tonight from 9:30, 5 Live has a review of the 2016 Formula One season, including extended interviews with Nico Rosberg and the Red Bull boss Christian Horner. And organisers for the Tokyo Olympics in 2020 have announced a budget of over £12 billion. The figure is more than double the original estimate made during the bidding process, but that hasn't included security and transportation costs.
BBC 5 Live.
2016 has been a year of highs.
We tell them there and then that they've won £1 million.
Their best performance in the whole of 2016. And lows.
All of those people must have known what was going on.
I didn't laugh once.
Ups. It's the world record for England. That is absolutely tremendous. And downs.
What is going on for our kids?
In the ways they've won the war.
Relive the biggest news stories, the amazing interviews and best sporting action from 2016 as heard here on 5 Live. In short, log on to bbc.co.uk/5 Live in short.
Take 5 Live on the go. On digital, online, smartphone and tablet. 5 Live Daily with Emma Barnett.
Lots of you getting in touch with your one word to describe 2016. Awful, alarming, reckoning, very nice, catastrophe. I will come back to more of those very shortly. Very interesting indeed as we review the political year of 2016. Well, at this time of year, my next guest would normally have been sweating over sales figures and pacing the shop floor with just a few more shopping days until Christmas. But this year, Andy Street, the former boss of John Lewis, can put all that behind him. He's leaving the world of retail, but now trying to make it in a world that's no less stressful, and the one I'm always immersed in on a Wednesday while I'm here in Westminster, which is politics. Andy Street is the Conservative candidate for the Mayor of the West Midlands. The election is next May, and some of the candidates are still being chosen, but we do know he'll be up against the Labour candidate, the MEP and former local MP, Sean Simon. When I spoke to Andy earlier, he told me he doesn't regret attempting a political career.
It was a wonderful job, frankly, running John Lewis for the best part of 10 years, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But the simple fact was that this opportunity to lead the West Midlands came up, and I thought I cannot let that pass by. It's my home region. I've been very heavily involved in running the local enterprise partnership here for the last 5 years, so I thought, no, I've learned something in business. Hopefully I can apply that for the benefit of everyone in the West Midlands.
So is this fulfilling a long-held dream of yours, or have you just thought about doing this recently?
It's not really a dream long held as such. I've been interested in politics right back to when I was at university, but no, I've been concentrating on running John Lewis, leading that business, and I was absolutely dedicated to that. But over the last year, the government's been pursuing its devolution agenda. There's been talk about the mayoralty coming, and really it's through the course of the last year I've thought I've got to do that. And maybe it's worth me saying just a little bit more about why I've been drawn to that. If one really takes the long view on this, the West Midlands is a region that's been really challenged over the last 30, 40 years. Had some tough economic times, but the fight back is beginning here. We've had sort of fantastic local economic growth in the last year, 5% in Birmingham, 7% in Solihull. So there's something happening here, and I just thought we've not got to squander that. We've got to continue to make the most of it, hence why I've stepped forward.
And what are you actually campaigning on? If you were to win, what do you think you could bring as mayor, the first mayor of this particular district?
Yeah, first mayor, and that's important. District's an interesting word because it's actually a big region. It's about 2.5 million people, stretching from Wolverhampton through the Black Country, Birmingham, Solihull to Coventry. So it's a big area, and it's an area that's got to succeed for the UK to succeed. The heart of our manufacturing economy and the heart of our new economy, really, with the new industries coming. So what's really important is, first of all, that we establish the mayoralty. No one thinks it's inappropriate to have a mayoralty in London, indeed in other big cities around the world, but we've not had it here. And it's about bringing new powers together that have been given by the government through devolution to actually drive the economy of the region forward. And if you ask the average person in Birmingham or Coventry, I think they'd say this new mayor gives an opportunity for us to do better than we've historically done.
In what way, though? I mean, what would you actually, apart from establishing it as a role that's not been done, what would you bring to the area, specifically?
Yeah, okay, so let's be clear about that. So establishing the role is the first thing, but then it's got to do specific jobs. Your question is very, very fair. And if one looks at what's in the mayoral role, it's first of all responsible for all transport. This region actually has had a huge underinvestment in public transport, so a step change there has been a clear commitment. It's also responsible for the long-term planning of housing provision across the area, not doing the job of the individual local authorities in planning permissions, but how does the whole area come together to provide the houses that future generations need? And then, perhaps most importantly of all, how are we going to make sure the population has the skills to drive forward our economy? So 3 critical things around transport, housing, jobs that will actually make this place a more wealthy place. So it's really about re-establishing this place as the best economy outside London.
Do you actually feel that you can do that, though, if you were to win, with the current government that's in place? Of course, you're the Conservative candidate. I expect you to be supportive of Theresa May, but there have been huge criticisms in some quarters about local spending, cuts to local spending, and also specifically around areas, let's say, such as youth services have lost, the best part of 100 million in the last year.
Yeah.
It's all very well saying you're going to look at transport and look at those things, but have you actually got a mandate to fund those things?
Yeah. So the answer to that is there are 3 quick parts to the answer. First of all, I would not be doing this and giving up the job back to the beginning of the interview if I was not absolutely sure that the Prime Minister and her ministers were fully behind this role and the principle of devolution. They are absolutely convinced, and it's one of the outcomes of Brexit really, that our regions need to do better than they have previously done. The second part of the answer is actually I believe that someone with a business background, knowing how to get to grips with complex issues, will actually have the best chance of sorting these things out. And the third thing, which comes to the heart of your question, is I actually think that someone who can work with central government and get the best levels of investments, the best deal for the West Midlands, has actually again got the best chance of delivering success.
You mentioned Brexit there. You voted to remain, didn't you?
I did vote to remain, but in a sense that is now irrelevant because what is most...
No, hang on a minute, because you are going to be across, as you say, millions of people if you were to win this. Birmingham voted out. I mean, is that a difficult conversation on the street for you?
No, it's not actually, because that's the historical conversation, who did what in June. The conversation now is, what are we going to do to make a success of Brexit for the West Midlands?
And what does a successful Brexit for the West Midlands look like?
I think it's, again, 3 quick things to mention. First of all, there is already a wonderful opportunity for this area, which is very much more dependent than other areas of the country on exporting. The fall in the value of the pound is already being seen in the export order books for West Midlands companies. Secondly, I think the government is looking at the overall situation and saying infrastructure investment, particularly out of London, is even more important than it was before. So that's a big, big opportunity for the West Midlands. And thirdly, actually, it's this whole question about how are we going to develop an economy for the future, for a new, open, outwardly trading Britain. So that is absolutely back to the skills to develop new businesses, new industries. And actually, we've got a great story here recently. More businesses started in Birmingham than anywhere else outside London for the last 3 years. So those new industries that are going to power us through a new situation are already being set up.
What type of Brexit then for the country do you favour? A soft Brexit or a hard one?
Oh, I think the question is a nonsense question, actually, that politicians and the media like to ask. The way that businesses put it on the ground is we do want access to be able to trade, because we know very well that a tariff...
Access to the single market.
Access to the single market, yeah. But that doesn't necessarily translate simply to a soft Brexit, because we may have...
Well, yesterday, Theresa May, if you forgive me, will have hinted in the strongest terms that she has yet that she will be looking for a transitional deal.
Yeah, and that might be exactly what we're talking about here. So we may have to leave completely, but then renegotiate trade deals which do enable West
You're a businessman. Why on earth is that in the interests of those other member states of the EU to do that?
Because they want to trade with the UK as well. Let's look at to sell here. French agricultural industry want to trade here, so we want to sell our products there. So I firmly believe that we will be able to establish a new trade deal. What terms that are, that's exactly what's being negotiated, will be negotiated in time.
Do you think Theresa May is a good businesswoman?
I think she's a very good leader. I think she would probably say that she is actually welcoming business people to come in and to take advice from business people. She's been very clear on that. But her job is not to be a better business person than businesses. Her job is to be a better national leader, and that's exactly why she'll be leading the negotiation.
Do you think under Theresa May we should be having workers and consumers on the boards of businesses?
That's very interesting, because of course John Lewis has exactly that, and it works well for John Lewis, I think.
But you just said she should be listening to businesses, and businesses have rejected that out of hand.
Businesses have rejected it being not right to say out of hand. Businesses have rejected it being a sort of universal panacea, saying do that and everything else will come right. And the government have listened to that, actually. The government's new policy on corporate standards actually moves away from what might have been described by some as a very straightforward answer, to say actually let's encourage this, but it's certainly not being mandated. And I think that's actually a very sensible development of the policy.
Or not carrying it through.
But what's wrong with not carrying things through?
Well, it feeds into potentially this idea that, if you've said something, you should follow it through. This is what was said when Theresa May, she wasn't elected, when she took over from David Cameron. She stood there and she said, I want to bridge the gap between the very successful in this country and those who are just about managing.
Yes,
one of the ways to do that, and I'm talking to you now as a businessman, is to change the way that businesses operate, and also close the gap between those who are very, very highly paid and those who aren't.
And there's absolutely no weakening of the resolve to do the last thing you've just said. But I do not happen to think that it's a sign of strength to press on and not listen to business. And I've just said to you that the Prime Minister should be listening to business, and actually on this corporate governance piece, it's a good example of exactly where that's happened.
Cracking down on executive pay and poor business practice, then, with your role having been at the helm of John Lewis and worked there for many years as you did, do you think Philip Green should fulfil the entire black hole? Should he plug that whole £300 million black hole in the pension pot? He's offered, we think, around 250 million so far.
So the one word answer to that is yes.
He should?
Yes.
And when you saw what happened with BHS, how was the reaction on the high street? Were there ripples of fear that this could be something that, not necessarily today, but in years to come, could be replicated elsewhere?
I think there's two parts to what you're saying there. Is there a general issue on the high street which goes, how is the high street changing? And the advance of online retailing is affecting every high street retailer. So in that sense, of course the issues are across the board. But BHS was a very different case, wasn't it? BHS had particular practices, and I don't think there was any sort of take, certainly not amongst John Lewis partners, or indeed, I suspect, amongst other great retail businesses, to say exactly what's happened to BHS is going to happen to us. But let's be clear, the industry as a whole does face enormous challenge and change.
And when you say very clearly there that Philip Green should plug that hole, are you disgusted by how he's behaved?
I think what really depresses me about it is that I've always believed that business is a force for good in society. Good businesses take people, often straight from school, straight from university, and give them a career for life, give them skills, teach them all sorts of sort of social engagement. It is genuinely a force for good. It's where social progress comes from, it's where innovation comes from, it's how we've actually become a better society over the years. And then what we see is a case here where this has not been business for good, and I'm really sort of depressed by the fact that business as a whole, the reputation is tarnished by relatively small numbers of bad practices, and that's the depressing thing about it.
So what, something like BHS and what's happened there, you think puts a bad name across all business?
Not all business, that cannot possibly be true, but people look and say, if that's what business does, it can't be good. Whereas actually the huge majority of businesses are, as I say, repeating myself, are forces for good in society. They're good employers, they're actually making progress, and they give people very good jobs for life. So that's the depressing thing, if the overall reputation is tarnished by the rogues. And the rogues, in this case, being Philip Green. You said that, yeah.
Well, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
isn't
of course it is. Yeah.
Okay. So, and for you then, when you look down the high street in a city, I know you're sat at the moment talking to me from Birmingham.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a sorry state of affairs in lots of places. You know, whether it's chicken shops, gambling shops, and just lots and lots of chain stores. You've got the direct experience of what it's like to run a retailer that's, had some huge successes, which should also say in other ways has slowed down. If you look at some of the plans now for the development and rollout of more stores in John Lewis specifically. But what would you say should be done about the diminishing success of shops on the high street and, independents not being able to afford their rents and rates?
Okay, so there isn't one straightforward answer to this, because actually different high streets are performing very differently. So here we are in the middle of Birmingham this morning, and if you walk around to Birmingham city centre or indeed Solihull just down the road, you'll see high streets which are clearly doing very well, and that's because the big locations are becoming like a magnet and drawing more business in. And even in the days of online trading, retailers want to have outlets in those big centres. The bigger challenges for what the market would call the secondary and the tertiary centres. Now, some of them are already responding really very well, and they're really, and particularly in more rural towns, often market towns, and they're becoming places where local services come together. And actually, some very good examples of high streets in that way. And indeed, even in the suburban areas of Birmingham, there are some that are doing really well by concentrating on independent traders and local services. But there are, as we know, a number where there's not going to be lots and lots of chain stores going forward, and those are more challenged. So you've got to come to the questions about what's being done to actively manage those locations, what's being done around change of uses away from retail, perhaps do other things, what's being done in terms of in time, landowners property owners accepting lower rents, and at the moment the market's sort of resisting that. So my personal view is there's got to be change for those locations that are not currently emerging as the winners in a very dynamic market.
There's got to be change. So, sorry, was that you hinting at potentially the people who own those sites having to accept lower rents and rates?
Potentially, or indeed different uses of them, indeed. So
that could be the death of the high street in some of those areas.
High street, no, not at all. The death that I've already said.
As we know it, sorry.
As we know it, that's the critical word. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, is it?
No, not necessarily. It's just trying to get a sense of what you think the future is.
There's always going to be change. So I've explained the future for some will be these really concentrated areas, as we just said, in the big city centres, and indeed the successful out-of-town locations as well. There will be some that are very much the local services, and we're seeing them move towards that. And perhaps the challenge is the intermediate locations, which as yet it's not clear which way they will go.
You're going up against someone who's very well known, Sean Simon, the Labour. Are you ready for the scrutiny that comes with being a politician?
I think so, yeah. I haven't done this lightly. And let's be clear, if you're CEO of a company for 10 years, it's scrutinised in a different way. I accept that. It's scrutiny over competence, over results of the company. But you very much stand as the centre forward for that company, don't you, in all of the performance. So it's different scrutiny, I accept. But yeah, I am ready for people to say, can this chap do the job? Has he got the record both in business and, of course, in terms of the local enterprise partnership here in Birmingham?
And people want to know about you. They do. There's now a lot of people say, I'd never, and I'm just fascinated because you've gone from a very successful place in business into politics. Usually when I'm sat here in Westminster, I'm speaking to the people who've already made the jump, so it's nice to talk to somebody who's on the way to making that jump, you hope. But are you ready for people to ask you questions about your personal life, about who you are? I mean, how you feel about those things?
The answer to that's yes, actually. So I can't say one looks forward to that. That would be completely wrong. But I accept if you're going to put yourself forward to lead a place, they want to know what type of person you are, what your values are, what makes you tick. So the answer to it is yes.
And so are you married, or do you have children?
Married. No, I don't. No.
And are you with anyone at the moment?
No, I'm not.
So you're single. And
yeah.
I asked the question because I'd read in reports about the fact that you share an apartment or a home with Michael Fabricant, the Conservative MP.
We share a holiday home in West Wales, in Tywyn. That's absolutely right. So everything that's been written in the press about that is right.
It is right, but you're not in a relationship. Okay, so for you, you're going into this, and the payoff will be what? Because it's no longer going to be a lovely John Lewis salary in the sense of financial rewards, but your motivation is what, to try and become mayor?
genuinely believe that there's an important job to be done here, and I think I am equipped to do that job and want to lead this region because, frankly, it deserves better than it's had before. If you look at the sort of outcomes for people here, they've not been particularly good. The renaissance, the resurgence has started, and I actually believe I've got a role to play in carrying that forward.
And when you look back at your time at John Lewis, what do you hold up as some of your biggest successes or your fondest memories? I mean, of course, it is Christmas time. Lots of people look forward to the John Lewis advert now.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's obviously the perhaps the most high-profile, fun part of the year, of course, and I've always enjoyed looking at those. Hopefully they brought a smile to people's faces over the years. But actually, the thing I'm most proud of, two things. First of all, we have moved the business to be a leader in this whole online retailing piece alongside our shops. The unique thing about John Lewis is how the two come together, and that's been a pretty tough business challenge when the high street changes as much as your earlier questions implied it was, and I think we've come through it pretty well, so that's a good example. But actually the thing that I'm even prouder of is despite that change, John Lewis has stayed loyal to its principles of how we trade with our customers, with our suppliers, and most importantly our partners. So we've absolutely stuck to what's made John Lewis different, and in time of change, that's a good thing to look back on.
What makes you tick then? If we're getting to know you and you're moving into public service like this and trying to, what sort of gets you out of bed in the morning beyond what you said about why you want this role?
Well, I think what got me out of bed for 10 years running John Lewis is probably a good way to start the question, was that I wanted to prove that our different way of doing things, because it was obviously an employee-owned business, that was as good, if not better, than a conventionally owned business. So there was a real sort of principle at stake here that we got to fight for. And if you then take that to the West Midlands context, actually there's another piece of fighting and principle here, which is that I think this region is one that has not performed as well as it should have done. And that sounds dry economics, but that's about people's lives, the rates of unemployment, the pay rates, all of those things. And then you come to the challenge. The challenge is, how can I personally contribute to making that better? So one thing that makes me tick in both examples is that sort of challenge, is probably the obvious word.
And if you don't win, you are going up against Sean Simon, I said that.
Yeah, that's correct.
If you don't win, are you going to stay in politics?
Oh, the people laugh at this actually, but there is no plan B. I've given a job up that I love in order to do this for all the reasons we've said. There is no plan B at all. I'll worry about that in May. I happen to think I will win, and all efforts going into securing that. And that's actually why I'm not worried about there not being a plan B.
Fighting talk.
Yeah, well, you don't go into it lightly, do you?
No, I'm sure you don't. Would you advise going into politics, having only just started dipping your toe in? Because people listening to this might be thinking, I might give this a go then.
I tell you what, why don't we make an appointment on May the 5th to have that question? But all I would say is that so far, and it's been the very early days, probably relatively soft days if I'm honest, it has been enormous fun because you do meet all sorts of brilliant businesses, community groups across the region, and that's the privilege, doing things I would never have seen in my previous life, so I've enjoyed it thus far.
Fighting talk indeed from Andy Street, the Conservative candidate to become the Mayor of West Midlands next May. He gave up his top job running John Lewis. Very interesting to hear how he's finding the world of politics. I've asked you for your single word to sum up the political year that has been 2016. Kathy says backwards. Andrew says freedom. Alan here saying it's despairing. Fred saying enlightening. Another message here, brilliant, with loads of exclamation marks. My word for 2016 from Martin says bizarre. And Neil on the Wirral says justice for the 96, referring there to Hillsborough. And my word to describe the year, travesty, an absurd and grotesque misrepresentation of what people really think and feel. That's David. Thank you for that. Keep those coming. In the next hour, we'll be live in Berlin as police hunt a Tunisian man who's now a key suspect in Monday's terror attack. We're telling you why shampoo sales are tumbling, and you don't want to miss this. The impressionist John Culshaw joins me to look back at a remarkable year in politics.
First for news and the best live sport. This is BBC 5 Live.
It's 12 o'clock on 5 Live. I'm Emma Barnett and you're listening to 5 Live Daily.
The top news story on 5 Live this hour. Police have a fresh suspect in the Berlin lorry attack.
And in sport, Northampton escaped punishment for fielding an understrength team in the Champions Cup.
This is BBC 5 Live.
First with the BBC News on 5 Live, here's Richard Foster.
It's reported German police have identified a suspect in the Berlin lorry attack. Our correspondent Robert Hall is there.
Media reports here, as yet unconfirmed by police, that the hunt has extended and is concentrating on a 24-year-old Tunisian man. He's named only as Anis A. from Tatouine on the Tunisian-Libyan border. He, according to press reports, was wanted for assault but disappeared before he could be arrested on that allegation. Police say he's extremely dangerous.
The attacks put Angela Merkel's open-door immigration policy under scrutiny, but the former Foreign Secretary Margaret Beckett told 5 Live Daily she's unlikely to regret it.
It's a decision she will have made with her eyes open and weighing up what Germany's interests were as they seemed to be at that time. She certainly will be concerned about the potential harm that can be made of that decision. But I think she's been around too long to kind of go, I wish I hadn't done that.
All roads are going to be closed near Buckingham Palace whenever the changing of the guard ceremony takes place. The tighter security had already been planned but has been brought forward. A multi-millionaire property developer from Monmouthshire has been found guilty of murdering his escort girlfriend. Peter Morgan, who's 54, strangled 25-year-old Georgina Simons at her home in Newport in January. The government borrowed more than expected in November in the first update on public finances since the autumn statement. Net borrowing reached $12.6 billion, but economists were expecting $11.6 billion. Our economics correspondent is Andy Verity.
Borrowing in November, $12.6 billion, that's about $500 million more than most economists were expecting. There's actually a risk that over the whole year we may end up borrowing a little bit more than we did last year. And this is all because they're projecting that the economy is going to grow more slowly.
All the locks at Birmingham Prison are being replaced after last week's riot. It's thought it'll cost around £750,000. A bunch of keys that was taken when the trouble started has been found, but officials are worried about copies being made. The Home Office says it'll try to overturn a court decision that it shouldn't keep computer data under laws known as the Snoopers Charter. The European Court of Justice has ruled that communications information can only be retained if it's used to fight serious crime. President Obama has banned new oil and gas drilling in US Arctic and North Atlantic waters. The joint initiative with Canada is one of the last big environmental protection measures before he leaves office next month. Steve Irwin is from Portland Fuels, an oil trading company.
This may have an effect a long way down the line, but oil prices would have had to have recovered significantly before it would open up these areas to commercial exploration, because the low oil price just means that it's too expensive to extract oil viably in these areas.
And Barclays Bank is being fined £23 million for rigging interest rates. Swiss authorities have also charged 5 other banks, including JP Morgan and Credit Suisse. RBS Group was given immunity after revealing the existence of a cartel to set rates. That's the news. Dalit has the sport.
Northampton have escaped sank punishment for fielding an understrength team in their Champions Cup defeat by Leinster. European bosses, though, have sent a pointed reminder that clubs must protect the integrity of the tournament. Saints rested the likes of Tom Woods, Courtney Laws and Louis Picamolles for the clash in Dublin on Saturday, and Mohammed 16 points to 13. Meanwhile, details of the investigation into George North's injury for Northampton against Leicester are set to be released later. The Australian Open has increased its prize money to £29 million for next month's tournament. It means the singles winners will each pocket £2.1 million, and the two-time Wimbledon champion Petra Kvitova is recovering in hospital after undergoing surgery on her hand. She's been ruled out for at least 3 months following a knife attack in her.
This is BBC 5 Live on digital, online, smartphone and tablet.
Good afternoon. We've got some pretty blustery conditions and some heavy rain around at the moment, actually, across Scotland, Northern Ireland. Frequent showers moving in here, thunderstorms and some snow over the playground as well. All accompanied by strong winds with some gales in exposed areas. Some brighter skies though towards eastern and southern Scotland, and temperatures about 5 or 6 degrees. A few showers still to come across Northern Ireland through this afternoon, but it's getting a bit drier here actually. Lengthier dry spells with